But one aspect of it is that these things can create pressure. I think we said last week, one of the things that young boys growing up, big boys don't cry. In other words, big boys don't show their emotions of pain, of sadness,
Mm.
vulnerability, it was a great disservice, and probably is still a great disservice, because men traditionally don't express their emotions very well. And we know that, whereas women tend to do that. But equally, with all these elements of womanhood, which we've talked about, all the great attributes, the kindness, the loyalty, and it's all true. And perhaps one thing that they are told, maybe as an equivalent to big boys don't cry,
Mm.
not an equivalent, but it's kind of along the lines, when they're told you and taught you have to be ladylike in all, certainly public situations. You've got to adhere to that ladylike picture of what a woman is. Now that's
Mm.
great. I'm sure women don't have any problems with that. But there probably are times when there's an expectation on women to
Mm.
be and to do the right thing, probably almost more so than men, that they've got to do the right thing, and that can create stresses in itself. Sometimes in life we all want to break out, don't we, of our little prisons of conformity, of having to live our lives to this regulation, that rule. And sometimes you want to say, to heck with it. I just need to sort of, you know, kick over the traces once in a while, not in a bad way.
No.
And I'm sure that applies to lots of us. I think the great song by Shania Twain, "Man, I Feel Like a Woman," is
Yeah.
it really expresses that, doesn't it? That, do what I dare, do what I want with my hair, do this, wear this. It's saying, yeah, the prerogative of females is to have fun. It should be. It should be for all of us to some extent. But women probably have always had this sense that they lag behind men, quite justifiably. Not That's not justifiable, but they have that sense that they're still fighting for some levels of equality. So it's good that they must assert themselves to say, yeah, we have the right to kick over the traces as well. Something we talked about a few weeks ago was the suffragettes, and this is an example maybe of women who are very law abiding, as women tend to be, but they had a cause in the late 1800s of wanting desperately to have the votes like men did, to be equal. And we talked about the suffragettes a few weeks ago in that respect. And maybe it's an example of women kicking over the traces, because they carried out in the next 30 years, from the late 1800s, lots of civil disobedience, lots of crimes. I mean, they committed arson. They burnt down quite a few buildings. They had window smashing campaigns of government buildings, etc. One of them, you may remember, walked out in front of the King's Horse in the Derby at Epsom, and she died. The result of all that really was that they got a partial vote in 1918 after the war, where they'd done a lot of the men's jobs at home in the war.
Mm.
You had to be over 30 and own property, though. And it was 10 years later, in 1928, that they finally got the vote over 21, as it was at the time, the same as men. But
Mm.
I was very interested last week, because I had lunch in a pub in Tunbridge Wells. I don't know whether you know Tunbridge Wells in Kent, very
Yeah.
nice town. And
Yeah.
I had in this pub, I've been there once before a few years ago, but it's called the Opera House, and it looks like an opera house outside a theatre. So we went in, and it's quite incredible, because there's two balconies of seats. There's sort of a royal box and other boxes on the sides. It's effectively the opera house, a theatre, except on the floor where the stalls would be, there were tables. On the floor where the stalls would be, there were tables. You could then go up on the stage, and there's tables there, and it's a real experience to go and have lunch there. We took photographs and so on. But I actually saw something, a little plaque on the wall, which really brought to life the suffragettes thing, because we can sit here and say, oh yeah, and the suffragettes, they burnt down buildings. And as I said, we weren't there. We don't even understand the mindset of the people. We try and look at it and have some empathy. We know they had a good cause, but to actually do it. But anyway, this plaque on the wall said in 1913, just before the First World War,
Yeah.
this pub was largely burned down by the suffragettes. And it
Whoa.
really brought home what I was saying, what we were talking about a week or two before, that this beautiful, and it's obviously restored, beautiful theatre was burnt down. And you can see their mindset was so strong to make their point. They had to have the vote, as they should have done long before, I'm sure. But to actually see that that's what they did to that beautiful pub,
Yeah.
but it was rebuilt, and just out of interest, once a year they sell all the seats, the balconies, the boxes, and the stalls they put in for a night of opera, which sounds quite an interesting thing. But yeah, so that's just an example, I think, of when women need to break down the traces. They've got to fight for what their rights are.
Yeah.
You know, we are in days of gender changes, different ways of looking at it. I mean, do you know, just a question, you probably don't know, but
Yeah.
again, censuses, statistics are gathered to find out, for example, how many of the world, probably the Western nations, have women leaders. What percentage of females are in leadership roles, i.e. prime minister, president, or even you could actually add to that CEOs and things like that, but mainly world leaders. What would you say? And the last one was done, I think, about 5 years ago, where they assessed this.
Right. 5 years ago. Okay. So that would be less than 10%. So about 7, 8%.
Well, no, it actually was 30%.
Wow.
Which again, this was done across 74 countries, which they took to be a statistical sample.
Yeah.
But 30% across all roles in those societies, it's about 43% that women have key roles in those societies. So you could say things are improving, but of course, women have to face the intricacies of juggling family responsibilities, with wishes for a career and stuff like that. And that sort of brings in what are the imperatives of being a woman in